I'd like to call to order the meeting of Homewood School District 153 for November 15th, 2021. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here? Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
We have approval of the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting of October 12th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to that set of minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have future dates.
Yes, next week is Thanksgiving. And of course, that is parent-teacher conferences. So Monday and Tuesday of next week, Monday is 8 to 8, 12-hour day. And then we follow up on Tuesday from 8 to noon. So our staff look forward to seeing either literally in person or on Zoom. We have both options available, meeting with all of our parents to talk about our kids' achievement this year.
Great, thank you. Any other future dates that we should know about? All right, and we have a presentation tonight. We have the Jerry Morin Educational Excellence Award. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. McAllister.
Yes, it gives me great honor to recognize the district office Morin Award winners. So last month we recognized a teacher, a student, and a support staff person from each building, and that was a great night for all of us. Our district office award winner was not able to be with us, and I insisted that she come tonight so she could get her due accolades. I don't know that there's a person who has been more negatively impacted by COVID in terms of having to change job responsibilities and just really work on the fly. Mary Markert is in charge of our transportation, and she also works closely with Kevin Keene, our director of operations, who's here this evening as well. And everyone has seen the bus issues that have been going on, not only in our district, but throughout the state of Illinois and the country for that matter. And Mary is the frontline person dealing with that each and every day. And she is there when I arrive at work, and I always come in, and the first thing is just waiting for that phone to ring and Mary to respond to a phone call from Kickert, our bus company, saying that, yeah, once again, we have a bus that's running late, or we have a bus that doesn't have a driver. And she is the one that has the thankless task of sending out the robocall to our families, informing them that we don't have transportation. And that's not a fun thing to do, as you might imagine. But I get to hear her each and every day as she fields phone calls from families who are upset. And she is just a real gem in terms of, you know, understanding where they're coming from and dealing with that. And those are not easy conversations to have. And Mary, I know you're retiring next year. I can't imagine. Yes, I know. I can't imagine what it's like to have this be your really your last full year. And you have handled it with grace. You've handled it with dignity. And you've been just such an asset. And when I asked the district office, they voted on this. And I said, who do you feel is the person most worthy of recognition from amongst our ranks? And they selected you, which tells me that they see everything that you're doing to make our community better, to help serve our students and families under the most challenging of times. So thank you, Mary, for everything.
And I believe we have a resolution.
We do. Is this on or?
Oh, tap it and see.
There we go. Okay. Whereas Mary Markert has been a caring and committed staff member since beginning her career in Homewood Schools in 2002. And whereas Mary Markert has successfully served in a variety of capacities within our district, including supervisor, secretary, registrar, and transportation and operations coordinator, and regularly goes above and beyond her regular daily tasks, such as serving on the sick bank committee and the safety committee, and is the recording secretary for district office meetings. And whereas Mary Markert is always the first to volunteer to help out a coworker and is the go-to person in the district office for a myriad of requests. And whereas Mary Markert regularly arrives early and stays late to handle any busing problems that may arise, and remains calm in the most stressful of situations. She brainstorms for solutions rather than complaining about problems. Whereas Mary Margaret has maintained grace and dignity in the face of daily bus problems which have reached historically chronic levels as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Homewood Elementary School District 153 hereby recognizes Mary Margaret for her dedication to students, staff, parents, and community members.
Mary, if you could come up.
Thank you again. Thank you.
I do want to add one thing. You are the definition of a positive person.
Yeah.
Like you are amazing. You are so positive, and that just rubs off on everyone and makes everybody stay a little bit better. So thank you for all that you've done for all of us. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that's come to address the board on any items that are not on tonight's agenda? Do we have any responses to previous questions?
We do not.
All righty. And do any board members have any reports on any meetings that you've attended?
Sure. So I'll go first. So Finance and Property Committee, we've met twice since our last boarding meeting in October. We've met on October 26th and November 8th, and we have been continuing the discussion on various capital projects, I guess, is probably the best word for it, for the district. And so further along the agenda, we'll have a more detailed discussion about what we've talked about. I don't know, Ron or Deb, if you want to add anything to that?
Just a great collaboration. Everybody worked really hard to try to imagine any possible solution. And I think that after multiple meetings and a lot of time put into it, we've come up with the best scenario.
It's 6:30 in the morning.
Let us know if you'd like to join the committee.
Any other board members have any other reports? Okay. We have to authorize, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you. So first, so many times the school board sits and gives praise to other people. Well, today is School Board Member Appreciation Day in the state of Illinois. And I'm not saying this because you're seated next to me. I'm not saying this because you signed my contract. I'm saying this because the service that you provide to our students and our families and our staff is really, really exceptional. Each and every one of you walks into this room and walks into our 6:30 meetings with good questions, difficult questions, challenging questions, but at the first and foremost of your minds are the kids of our district. And you're always advocating for our kids, and you're always advocating for our staff. And I know as a school board member, it has been a really, really challenging year. It's a challenging position. It is a thankless position. But this year, above all other years, it's a really, really difficult position to be in. When you know the decisions you make are going to upset 49% of the people likely, right? That's just the nature of the pandemic. So for me and all of us in this district, many of whom are seated in the back, the administrative team, we can't thank you enough for what you do. So I just wanted to mention that. I know we sent out an email and a tweet and all those other great things, but the work you do is truly, truly impactful for our kids. So thank you. I also wanted to mention last week, the Churchill principal, Sarah Schnorr, successfully defended her dissertation. So that's, again, a really, really great accomplishment for Sarah. She wasn't able to be with us this evening, but I did promise her, actually I kind of forced her, that we will recognize her in December because she didn't like that. She doesn't want the public accolades, but again, to finish a dissertation while leading a new school for her, you know, this is year 2. She came in at the start of the pandemic while raising 2 beautiful young daughters, really a remarkable accomplishment, so we're very proud of Sarah. Just wanted to let you know our enrollment this year is 19 students higher than last year. So we're at 1,854 students, which historically has been very consistent for our district. We've been in that 1,800 to 1,900 range for several years now. Also, a few meetings ago, we had a report about the federal ESSER dollars that have been so impactful to schools, and I detailed how we have been spending that money. The last chunk of that is ESSER 3. The third installment. And our district received about $2.3 million from the ESSER 3 portion. And so some of the projects we're talking about tonight, you know, the inspiration for doing HVAC work in our buildings was in part because of the federal money that was earmarked specifically for indoor air quality. So a big chunk of that ESSER money is going to be allocated to help improve the air quality in our buildings for our students and staff. But then there's also a variety of other areas, and we're going to publish our ESSER spending plan on our website so that all of our families can see exactly what that money is being earmarked for. And obviously, if anybody has any comments, I welcome them to email me directly, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about how we're planning on spending that money, because again, it's helpful to us to accomplish a lot of the things, including learning loss with our students. The Illinois report card, I know it's on our agenda in a little bit. You'll see the report card that was just published on October 29th. A lot of information is missing because of the pandemic. So there were no summative designations given for the second year in a row. The state waived those. So schools are not being evaluated, if you will, as a result of the pandemic. I did want to point out there is a column on there for chronic absences. And you'll notice that our chronic absence numbers are much, much higher as a result of the pandemic. So chronic absence, a student who misses 10% or more of the school year as a result of whatever reason. So if they are not in school, regardless of whether it's excused, unexcused, for 10% or more of the days, they are listed as a chronically absent student. So you'll see those numbers are very high, and that just shows why the pandemic was such a challenge for so many individuals who were not able to physically attend school or remotely attend school. It was a real challenge, which is why we wanted our kids back in school. That's why the governor made such a push this year to get our kids physically back inside our school buildings. And then also we'll talk more about the change in the calendar that I'm recommending, again, as a result of the pandemic. I think that's it. Anybody have any questions as far as the things I mentioned?
Yeah, just quickly, I know that this isn't a typical year. Look back in regards to the report card. And are there KPIs in regards to, so for instance, student mobility rate, those retention is 90+%, which most companies would love, especially with the great resignation
Sure.
that's going on.
Sure.
Or is it pretty much, you know, we're just tracking this and then we'll, you know, create the baseline next year? Just curious.
You talking about what's the intervention plan for?
Well, just looking at the report cards, I was just, you know, I looked over the mobility rates, you know, just as far as seeing student movement in and out of district and so on, and then the retention rate. So are there baselines or like KPIs that the state really would like for folks? They can't mandate it, but I guess they could.
Yeah, they certainly do have historical trends as far as what those numbers traditionally look like. Student mobility specifically is one that we did see more transiency last year as a result. The teacher retention rate, like you mentioned, is very good despite the effects of the pandemic. I do expect that number to go down though, right? These numbers are from last year. So yes, there are historical trends there. And then it's a matter of our team trying to, identify what is it that's causing our students to leave us if they are leaving us. And more importantly, back to the chronic absenteeism, what types of things can we do to ensure our kids are here? So did that answer your question?
Yeah, and so my follow-up is, do you think it's an opportunity for us to, this is not to assume, is what we deem to be, we being you and your team, as far as what's considered to be a good KPI for our district, right? So when we see 89 and 91, being able to celebrate some successes, knowing that 10% left, but right.
Sure. No, that's a figure that we're very proud of, and I think it speaks to the culture that
value
exists.
proposition,
Yeah,
definitely.
that exists in our district. That people, despite a lot of challenges in education, people want to stay here. So those figures are wonderful. It's every time somebody loses, again to your point, every time somebody leaves our district, the question is why, and there's a variety of reasons why. But the goal, of course, is to maintain. It's hard to find people, so you certainly want to maintain them once they're here. You want to retain those individuals. So yeah, no doubt, we're proud of that number. And if you see compared to the state number, or the state average rather, it is better than the state average. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we have several consent agenda items. The first is to authorize the chief school business official to pay the usual and customary bills for December 2021. And then the second item is the approval of the school report cards. Did you want to add anything to that?
No. Yeah, the report cards, again, are published under the IllinoisReportCard.com. Great resource for families to go to learn about our school district.
And then we have the approval of an intergovernmental agreement concerning student record information.
Yes, our students, being an elementary district, our students matriculate to the high school. And under the Illinois Student Records Act, student information is protected. In a unit district, when kids go to the high school, it's obvious that an elementary school would send the records to the high school. Seeing that we're legally two separate districts, 153 and 233, the legislature provided for a new allowance intergovernmental agreement that basically says we can now transfer any and all records between the two districts, which makes complete sense since our students are going there. So this is merely a formalization of that agreement.
Any questions?
I'm sorry. So curious in regards to potential downstream impact to that, right? So a student is disciplined in our district. Hope is that, they learn from their mistakes, they move on to the next level. Just curious, not that they have to be answered here, but what does that mean when they go to high school? And I know we have folks on the board that, intake and so on. I want to assume that these students get a fresh start, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just movement of records versus, helping reinforce further discipline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I can speak as a former employee of the high school that, when kids come in as freshmen, the goal, of course, is 100% that they're successful there. And yes, every student gets a fresh start. Discipline records do not count against the student when they go to the high school, so I know the high school uses a demerit system to track disciplinary infractions, and every student enters as a zero with demerits. And so, yeah, the goal is basically to be able to ensure that the high school, it's similar to what we have here between our three buildings. When a student comes from, Willow to Churchill and Churchill to James Hart, it's helpful to staff to know about that student's previous experiences. At the same time, not prejudging them though. Yeah, so your point is very, very well taken, but discipline records don't negatively impact a student when they matriculate to the high school. Absolutely.
Okay, we have the approval of the 2021-22 2022 LEA Collaborative Transition Agreement with Easter Seals Chicago.
Yes, we have an obligation to provide early intervention services to students, and we work with Easter Seals to ensure that transition happens. Miss Mandy Souza, did I handle that correctly? Anything you'd like to add to that? Thank you.
Any questions on that agreement?
No.
All right, we have the approval of Financial Municipal Advisory Agreement.
Many of you recognize the name Elizabeth Hennessy. Elizabeth is our municipal advisor who's been working with us as we've looked at funding options for the projects that we're going to talk about this evening. So that is an agreement with her for her services.
Questions on that? Okay, we have the Personnel Report.
You can see many names listed on the personnel report. The only one that I specifically would like to mention, Nona Rydell, who has been with us for 8 years at James Hart School. She and I started together. Anybody who works at James Hart or anybody who comes in the office knows Nona. She's just an incredibly kind, compassionate, quiet, hardworking. She's the ideal employee, and it's a loss for us. But she's moving on to the high school actually, and their gain. So I'm glad she's still in our community and still will be serving students and families. But I did want to thank Nona for everything that she's done for District 153.
Great, thank you. And any questions on the Personnel Report? Okay, we have approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented in item 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, 7E, and 7F.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We have several action agenda items tonight. The first is the second payment of October 2021 bills and the first payment of November 2021 bills. Any questions on the bills?
I do have one comment. So one of the things that I looked at or noticed when I was reviewing the bills was an expense that we haven't incurred in the past. And the expense that I'm talking about in particular is a payment to Lenovo for repair of the devices that were sent out. So I know, every year we talk about raising fees for students and so on. And I recall one of the fees that we increased this year is actually the fees that are associated with devices. And so I just wanted to point out, when I was looking at the bills in October alone, the district paid out $17,400 for the repair of devices for things like broken screens, broken keyboards, and stuff like that. And then in November, and we're only halfway through November, we've already paid out $1,800 in repair bills for the devices here. So, I think, well, I'm sure the increase in the fees was not may have been significant for a lot of folks, but just so that there's some realization there, you can see that we're actually the expense to repair these devices when they're broken actually is pretty significant, and the district does cover a significant amount of the fees that are associated with the repairs of the devices. So just wanted to point that out when I was looking through the bills this year. And in past years, I don't recall seeing this type of an expense. So this is new to the district for this fiscal year. So
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that. Beth, anything that you wanted to add in that regard to repair of laptops?
no, I think the explanation I got earlier, I think was sufficient, but I thought it would be just helpful to point it out because I know as a board, often we have conversations or discussions about whether to increase fees and how much to increase fees and stuff like that. So I think this is one where we can actually see we can see an actual expense, as a line item to Lenovo to cover the expense for repairs for our devices. So the explanation I received earlier today is sufficient. Thank you, though.
And I'd also point out one other fee, and again, since Mary is here, one of the questions that Alex had raised was regarding transportation fees. We all know the issues that Kickert has experienced with driver shortage. So we have been forced, I say we, Mary and Dr. Gibson, our chief school business official, have been forced to try to find creative solutions for transportation. So we have contracted with other companies to provide services, transportation for special education students, McKinney-Vento students, et cetera. So some of the items you see in the board packet regarding bills may be a vendor you're not familiar with, but that's the explanation. It's basically to provide coverage for Kickert when they're not able. Mary, did I answer that sufficiently? Very good. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions on the bills? Is there a motion to approve?
Moved upon the recommendation of the chief school business official that the Board of Education authorize the second payment of October 2021 bills and the first payment of November 2021 bills in an amount not to exceed $2,415,984.54.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We have approval of the preliminary 2021 tax levy.
Yes, Dr. Gibson was not able to be with us this evening, but he will be presenting the details of the 2021 levy at our next board meeting. So this is the preliminary levy. The only thing I'd point out, it does represent an increase of 1.4%. So by law, we're able to increase the levy from the previous year by 5% or by the consumer price index, whichever is less. So 1.4 was the consumer price index. Keep in mind, we've all been seeing what inflation numbers have been for this year. So my guess is next year that levy number will be markedly higher as a result of the CPI. But for the 2021 school year, it represents an increase of 1.4%. But he will be here to provide more details next month.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the preliminary tax levy?
No.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved upon the recommendation of the Finance and Property Committee and the Chief School Business Official that the Board of Education approve the preliminary 2021 tax levy as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We have a revision to the 2021-2022 school calendar.
Yes, so the calendar that was originally approved for this school year provided for 5 early release days for our students, and that calendar is available on our website. You can see the specific dates, the most recent of which was October 29th. As we have gotten into this school year and I've had the opportunity to work closely with our staff, there is a feeling that is, I don't want to say it's commonplace, but a lot of our staff are struggling with the workload of the pandemic. The fact that we're now trying to provide lessons for students who are in quarantine, who are close contacts, or who are positive cases. Frequently, I would say it's more the rule rather than the exception. Staff are giving up planning time because they have to cover for substitute teachers that we do not have. So the bottom line is our staff is not able to accomplish a lot of the educational things that we want them to accomplish and that they've been able to accomplish within the confines of the school day. And so this is causing a lot of stress and frankly, we're not able to meet the goals that we had established at the start of the school year. We're working toward them, but I think one of the ways that we can help assist in this is by the addition of some early release days to our calendar second semester. I will say, I make this decision, I make this recommendation with the knowledge that this is a challenge for families, and it's not easy when kids get out of school in the middle of the day. And so I'm trying to strike a balance between providing what our staff need, but also being aware that we just can't do this ad nauseum because that provides a little bit of a challenge for our families. So we're trying to give advance notice as much as possible. We'll be adding 3 early release days, 1 in February, 1 in March, 1 in April. And those dates specifically February 1st, March 17th, and April 27th, so that our staff can work on some of the PLC goals that we've identified, and also get some of the time needed to create specific learning targets and assessments. So that's the proposal, that's the reasoning behind it. So basically, we will be going from 5 early release days this year to 8 under this proposal. In the past, we've had as many as 12 early release days on our calendar. So I do not intend for 8 to be the number moving forward year after year after year. Obviously, the pandemic will play a role in that, and I'm not going to get into the business of trying to predict what next school year will bring. But certainly for this school year, I feel it's appropriate. But I also think that as we look at our future calendars, keeping that number in the neighborhood of 5 is an appropriate thing for us under normal circumstances. Any questions on the proposal or the calendar revision?
No, I mean, support if I'm not an expert in this space, especially within the school district and what's best. But from a parent perspective, I'm just curious in regards to how do you choose the day of the week, right? Because there's been a view of end of the week versus middle of the week or Monday or whatever. Not that we have to go into detail here, but just high level, just curious of the type, if you've gotten feedback before, early dismissals and preferred days of the week from a parent perspective, from a child care perspective.
Yeah, so these 3 dates specifically were selected by looking at the existing calendar, seeing when the current breaks happened, and then trying to find a date that was roughly in the middle of those dates, so as to not have, quote, back-to-back days is basically what it came down to. So of the 3 days that are being added, 1 is a Tuesday, 1 is a Wednesday, 1 is a Thursday, depending on the month. But that is the method that was used.
Well, I mean, with anything, communication is key, right?
For sure.
So,
For sure. Yeah, and we'll be publicizing this, obviously the minutes, but we'll be sending out a special communication about the revision in the calendar. We'll get the revised calendar put on the website once the ROE approves it. But yes, we will definitely be publicizing that with our families so everyone is aware.
Okay, any questions on the revision? Is there a motion?
Moved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that we approve the revised 2021-2022 school calendar as attached.
Second.
Roll call, please.
yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We have a resolution for installment purchase agreement.
Yes, so I can talk a little bit about kind of the background, and then I'm going to ask our Finance and Property Committee members, Alex Bosch is the chair, and then Deb Havegorst and Ron Zinnerman. We've spent a lot of time together the last several months looking at options, and let me just kind of spell out where this all came from. So the pandemic obviously put a focus on interior air quality, and what can you do to improve the air quality within your buildings? I don't know if our community is necessarily aware of this. All 3 of our buildings were built in the 1950s or 60s. Churchill was built in the 60s. There have been no major renovations at Churchill School since it was built. So we're now going on 50 to 60 years in that building with no major work being done. Willow School was built in the 60s. The last renovation done there, major renovation, was done in 1995. And then James Hart, the building that we're in this evening, actually the space that we're in, it was built in the 50s. Over time, there have been additions put on, but the most recent part, the sports complex, the media center where we currently are, was built in 2002. So it's been 20 years since we've done any major work in our district. Back to the issue of interior air quality, when you have mechanical systems that are in many cases 50 or 60 years old, imagine your own house. We would never let our furnace go 50 years. It physically couldn't do that. Yet we have mechanical systems in our classrooms in many cases that are that age. And thank goodness Kevin Keene, our Director of Operations and Maintenance, he's here this evening. But he and Paul Klemchek, his assistant, and his team have done a wonderful job of, in many cases, patching things together with items you can't even find in stores anymore. So I say all that because our mechanical systems are horribly, horribly out of date in many cases. So when the federal government said there is ESSER money available to help address interior air quality, we immediately began thinking of what can we do to address some of our mechanical systems that are long overdue. Many other school districts have used ESSER funds in the same way. So this is a common way and quite frankly, an intended way that the federal government wanted to help in this regard. So we began exploring how can we improve air quality. There's really two different things that our architects immediately came to us with. They said, A, there's places in your buildings that right now, the way you get fresh air in those spaces is you open windows, right? In other words, there aren't mechanical systems at all. And B, there's places that have mechanical systems, but they are just outdated, they're old. And so we said, what can we do? What's it going to take to improve those areas? And so they put together a comprehensive study, and again, I'll let our F&P members speak to that. And then the second thing that came out of this conversation was an identified need for space in our buildings, specifically Willow and Churchill schools. Those two facilities, education has changed pretty dramatically since the 50s and 60s when those facilities were built. And even though we have added an addition again at Willow in the mid-90s, the amount of interventions, which is extra work for kids in smaller settings, the amount of interventions has necessitated more and more smaller spaces. And we simply have classrooms set up under the old model, and that doesn't provide for the intervention work. We have kids who are eating in the same place we're holding physical education class, which the pandemic has really magnified the fact that that's a real challenge. That's been a challenge. It'll continue to be a challenge. That's not something we can address overnight. However, just in terms of that intervention space, we began to search for solutions to our space issues. So between the HVAC work and between basically density issues at Willow and Churchill, we began to meet as a committee with the 3 committee members and the architects and the construction managers. So I'll turn this over to the committee. Anything that you guys would like to share about those discussions or kind of what we're thinking as we're planning for the future?
Sure. So I guess probably the first thing to do before we jump into a list of the projects that we're going to propose that the board vote on, I thought it might be helpful to kind of talk about the process that we went through. So like Dr. McAllister has mentioned, we've been meeting for 2 months now, I think, about 2 months. 6:30 in the morning, often 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And we've talked about, I don't know how many different projects, how many different iterations, and like Scott said, Dr. McAllister said, started with, how do we address HVAC, how do we address air quality situations and issues, and how do we address space issues at both Churchill and Willow. So with that, one of the things we looked at was we took input from a lot of different sources. We looked at recommendations and thoughts from White and Company, the district's architect. We had representatives from Gilbane, our construction management company. They came in and they provided some ideas and some thoughts on what we needed to do. And then Kevin Keene and his staff also. That was kind of our first pass in terms of taking in information. And that wasn't just a one-time thing. That was something that we asked questions a lot over these meetings and wanted more follow-up and asked for more follow-up and more ideas. And then I think the fourth group of people that we asked information for was the staff in the district. So Dr. McAllister sent out a survey to the district asking for staff input on what they would like to see done. And so there were 133 people who responded to it. They provided ranking. They provided open feedback. I know I read all of the feedback. I looked at all of the responses. And so with all of that information, from those 4 groups, we took all of that information and we thought about different combinations. We thought about different projects. We asked questions. Well, what about this project? Why didn't we think about this project? We added this to the list. We removed that to the list. And so I think every one of our meetings that we've had over the last 2 months, that's kind of been our approach, our methodical approach to trying to figure out what it is that Finance and Property wanted to recommend. Additionally, I should mention, we also took in input from, or received input from Dr. McAllister and the administrative staff, and the administrative council as well, because some of these decisions impact some of these groups or some of these individuals separately. So that's kind of what I wanted to comment on before we get it. I don't know if Ron or Deb, if you wanted to comment on the process and your thought about it.
I believe that the group was very creative in just throwing out as many different solutions as possible to try and come down to the best solution all around. And I think we were successful in doing that.
I agree to everything that was said, and there were some factors that, if this was 3 or 4 years ago, quite frankly, we would be able to get a lot more done with the same amount. But with barges, sitting off the coast of California, even what we've gotten from our partners before had to change a bit, right? Just cost of labor, parts, and so on. And a big factor in some of our decisions, what can we get done immediately versus it sounds good on paper, but it really won't bring immediate relief to the most pressing situations at Church Hill and Willow. So just a combination of prioritization, but also reality in regards to our current situation, and the fact that we have to move smartly but expeditiously because everyone else is competing, trying to get construction work done and so on. So it was an honor to be a part of this, much is given, much is required. And I just want to go on record as saying that when you do this, you don't take it lightly, and you realize that there's still some things that need to be done. We do not have revenue streams coming in that are unplanned. So, and unfortunate with the new passing and legislation on the federal level that we don't see more coming into the school districts for these types of things. So, I appreciate all the work that was done, and John and Tina and everyone. It was just a great collaborative effort.
Yeah. Any board members have any question about the process? Okay. With that, I think what we'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the recommendations that are before the board coming out of Finance and Property. So I'm going to put this, we have this categorized into 3 groupings. So the first one we'll talk about is HVAC, or air quality, Dr. McAllister alluded to before. So what we are recommending to the board is that we address the air quality at all 3 of the buildings. And as like Dr. McAllister said, is we'll repair any of the unit ventilation systems or equipment that are at all of the buildings. Any of the equipment that's in place today will get repaired so it's functional. Any places where there aren't unit ventilation units, sounds silly, but where those don't exist, those will get put into place. So no longer will we have to rely on opening a window for ventilation or anything like that. So the idea is to improve the air circulation and the air quality in all of our buildings across the district. So with that being said, the price estimate to do this project from Gilbane is $4.2 million. Of that $4.2 million, about just shy of $1.1 million will come from ESSER funds. Okay. The second category of projects is addressing space. So again, I can't remember how many combinations we looked at and viewed in terms of addressing space at the buildings, and the recommendation that we have before the board is to add 2 classrooms to Churchill, which will be about $1.56 million. And then at Willow, our recommendation is to install mobile classroom unit, much like the one that we have at Churchill, and that will provide an additional approximately 4,000 square feet of space at Willow. And it will, it's just like the one that's at Churchill. It'll provide 4 classrooms, 2 small offices, and 3 bathrooms in it. So that's hopefully addressing the space issues. and will allow Willow to decompress from where it is today. And then our third group of proposed projects before the board is a variety of different projects that Dr. McAllister had alluded to earlier, is basically some infrastructure projects that, that have boilers that have been around from the 50s and so on. So the recommendation is at James Hart to replace 3 boilers in the amount of about $775,000. They're boilers that are aging and at the end of their life. We'll also recommend replacing 2 boilers at Willow. The estimated cost is approximately $420,000. The other thing we are recommending is replacement and installation of shades and blinds district-wide. Another project, I'm going to lump all together, is basically replacing or dealing with roof issues at all 3 buildings. So one of the roof replacements is here at Hart, about $400,000 replacing roofs at Hart. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we undertook some capital projects here at Hart, and we replaced a lot of the roof here at Hart. This project will complete the replacement of all the roofs at Hart, so it should alleviate or eliminate a lot of any leaking issues at Hart. We also have $100,000 earmarked for both Churchill and Willow, $100,000 each, to address roofing issues at each of those buildings as well. And then finally, the last project that we are recommending is $600,000 to renovate all of the bathrooms across all of the buildings in the district. So that group of projects is just shy of $2.6 million. So overall, all the projects that I've talked about total about $8.7 million, of which about 1.5 will come from ESSER funds. One thing I should mention is when we talked about all these projects, one of our intentions was to identify projects or get projects identified and on the list or on schedule for completion before the next school year. So out of all the projects I listed, all of them with the exception of the addition at Churchill, we anticipate will be ready to go in time for the next school year. The addition at Churchill tentatively is targeted with a completion date of January 2023. So Ron or Deb, if you want to add any comments or anything to the list of projects or thoughts?
It's amazing how succinct and simple it sounds, honestly, compared to what we've been through to get to that point. And thank you, Alex, for your leadership as our committee chair.
Definitely, Alex. So when you show up at 6:30 and you see your fearless leader sitting there, like, let's go. Very inspiring, and thanks for the partnership. We don't take this lightly, and then, I think what stuck out to me was 2 words: polar vortex. And, you don't want to lose to the, all the elements, and Mother Nature typically wins. But again, John and team, there was a lot of, as you mentioned, patchwork, and, shame on us if we don't learn from that. And these opportunities don't come up so often. And I think, with my finance background, not at the level of, Raymond James, this opportunity and just the financing of it does not set us back. And these are things that we should also mention will pay dividends for the district in years to come because of the investments now in regards to the energy spend and the workarounds that will be eliminated, and just getting us into the 2000s as it relates to our boilers and so on. So that's it.
Any other board members have any questions?
The work that you guys did, I sat in on one meeting, and how you were able to take all the information you were looking at and narrow it down into this package, it's very impressive. And I also want to mention that our maintenance staff you guys are miracle workers. I mean, this stuff, how you are able to make buildings work with very often the things that were originally put in the 60s, and the buildings always look beautiful and clean and well-maintained, and they work. And I'm looking forward to having some of this stuff done so you have a few less headaches, and can pay attention to a few other things that you just haven't had the time to do. but you guys are amazing. Mm-hmm.
A rubber band and a
Right.
toothpick.
Never heard of it.
Duct tape.
Having Kevin as part of these meetings was invaluable. It was
Yeah.
great to have his input, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate all that you've done and your sage advice in helping us get to this stage. It's made a big difference in narrowing down all the choices. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We'll have some new warranties to put into
Yes.
the drawer.
Right.
For sure. Anyone else have any questions or concerns or thoughts?
You know, I can just add, you know, although we don't sit on that committee, your communication to us and bringing us in along the way, greatly appreciative. And it wasn't just you spewing facts or data. It was getting feedback, you know, allowing us to express our issues, you know, our questions, our concerns. So no, thank you for including us in that.
I
We-
agree,
yeah.
definitely, Alex, for your leadership. It's been great. And thank you, Deb and Ron, for you guys putting in all that hard work. The way that you communicated to us, it seemed like the meetings were real simple and easy, although I know that was not the case. But for us to have it all laid out and the way you presented to us, it's excellent. So
Yeah,
thank you.
the board member suite didn't make the cut.
Skybox.
All right.
So I guess probably the next thing to discuss is how are we going to fund this? So, which brings us to what the item is on the agenda. So obviously, as I mentioned, you know, just shy of $1.5 million will come from ESSER grants from the federal government. And then the balance of it is, you know, 7.2-ish, $7.3 million. And so what is on the agenda for the board to vote on is the issuance of bonds, debts, debt certificates. So I'm going to take my attempt at this. So Scott, I'm going to ask for your tag team on this also. So every school board in the state of Illinois has a certain amount of debt authority capacity at any given time. Every school board district has a different debt capacity, and the debt can be used to deal with and address capital projects or other emergent needs that are outside of their regular operating budgets that they operate with. So this board in the past has issued debt, like we're doing today, to address some of those issues. Several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I remember I was on the board, probably Deb, Jim, Shelley and I were on the board, and we issued debt to, like I said, we dealt with the roofs. We replaced the roofs here at Hart. We replaced 2 of the boilers here in James Hart. So this is a mechanism that every school board has available to them. So over the years, 153, we've been paying down the debt that we've issued in the past. And so because we've been paying it off, our debt capacity has been going up over time. And so our debt capacity is at a point right now where we have the opportunity to and the ability to issue debt to assist us with doing these various projects. And so I don't know if you want to add anything else, Scott, or
Your-
if
your
Ron or
dis-
Deb, you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's great description.
Yeah, just that we looked at different amounts that were available to us and what made the most sense and what it was going to cost. And again, it was a huge process to make sure we were doing what was best, covering what we needed to do and doing what was best for the district and the community.
Yeah, and I would just add to new board members and just those that are new to the process that may be listening, you know, it's good that you talked about the precedents and the history there. And I think this is under Dr. Gibson and Dr. Mitchell now, Dr. McAllister in regards to, you know, being prudent with funds and resources. You know, we have our personal credit scores, but we're, you know, because of our good standing, we have the ability to get friendlier, but more finance is more opportunistic for us and our ability to repay because we've had a history of that. And I just want to make sure that people don't take that lightly because I don't think that every district can say that.
And actually, one thing I should tie back, earlier in the agenda, we approved a contract with Elizabeth Hennessy. So Elizabeth is our advisor who's helped us in our conversations and probably fielded a lot of questions from us about what we can issue and the long range outlook in terms of paying it back and stuff like that. So Elizabeth has been very helpful and instrumental in helping us figure out what we can, help us figure out what the right amount is to issue and what should we do realistically and from a very fiscally responsible perspective.
Yeah, I would just point out, Ron, to your point, our ability to borrow today was made possible by the boards of education in previous years and by Dale Mitchell and other superintendents, right? It is an ongoing cycle of fiscal prudence. So because previous boards were responsible, because Dr. Mitchell was responsible, we have the ability to borrow today. And at the same time, all of you are aware that our decisions today impact future boards of education. So we don't want, Deb, you mentioned this, we looked at a lot of different amounts that we could potentially borrow, ultimately deciding that $8 million was the number that made the most sense and would address our needs, but not financially cripple or burden future boards of education. So it's a balance, but we also, and Shelley, I know you're the longest tenured board member, but our ability to borrow today is based on the decisions that all of you who've previously served on the boards made back then in a responsible manner. So thank you.
And I just want to reiterate what Dr. McAllister said. I mean, that was something that we looked at is like, how long is it going to take us to pay back this $8 million? Do we have the ability to borrow more? Yes, we do. Does it make sense to future boards and tie their hands? Absolutely not. It did not make sense, and we did not want to put future boards or Dr. McAllister or anyone who may follow Dr. McAllister down the road in a terrible financial position. So it was trying to come up with a good amount. It was trying to balance our immediate needs with long-term strategy, fiscal strategy for the district. So.
Well said. Any other questions? All right, thank you to the three of you, Dr. McAllister and John, for getting us here. And Kevin, thank you for your guidance, truly.
And the staff for their input too.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we have a resolution for installment purchase agreement. Is there a motion?
Moved upon the recommendation of the Finance and Property Committee that the board approve the resolution authorizing and providing for an installment purchase agreement for the purpose of paying the cost of purchasing real or personal property or both in and for the district and for the issue of not to exceed $8,035,000 general obligation debt certificates, limited tax, for the purpose of improving sites, building and equipping additions to and altering, repairing and equipping existing school buildings and facilities of the district, and authorizing the proposed sale of said certificates to the purchaser thereof.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We have employment.
Yes, we are always looking to hire people in District 153. So the beat goes on. We're excited to add individuals as assistants in a couple of our buildings, as well as a custodial position. Tess Schaefline, a special ed assistant at Willow School. She's started and doing a fabulous job. Robert Stewart, custodian at Willow, part-time. Cynthia Curtis Wittenberg, assistant at Churchill, and Armando Lopez, assistant at Willow.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Moved upon the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Education approve the employment of Teresa Schaefline, effective November 3rd, 2021, Robert Stewart and Cynthia Curtis Wittenberg, effective November 8th, 2021, and Armando Lopez, effective November 15th, 2021, upon the terms recommended by the superintendent, conditioned only upon receipt of a satisfactory criminal background report, and upon the receipt no later than November 30th, 2021, of evidence of proper legal qualifications for the position to be filled.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Motion carries. And along the lines of employment, since I know this meeting is out there on YouTube and people might be watching it, we are still looking for substitute teachers. You can call Mary Kay Dunn in the district office. You do not need a degree in education to be a substitute teacher. You need an associate's degree?
Associates,
An
yes.
associate's degree
Yes.
to be a substitute teacher. If you can work 1 day a week, we need you. So if you are watching and you would like to come and help us, and you're curious about what you can do to really make a difference this year, if you want to make a difference for our district this year, come and be a substitute teacher, please. Okay, enough of that. Are there any discussion items tonight?
No.
Is there any written communication to the board? We do have a need for executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations and specific personnel. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We will return only to adjourn. Thank you all.